First of all, antagonist does not mean villain. Antagonists are simply characters that are in opposition or are in the way of the protagonist and their goals. In most stories, the protagonist is usually the hero of the story, so the antagonist would often default to being the villain, but this is not always the case. The obvious example is L from Death Note. He is the antagonist to Light Yagami, our protagonist, but he is not the villain of the story. That role belongs to Light. Antagonists are fun because there can be many things or characters preventing a single protagonist and their goals. For example, antagonists can be non-human. In Your Name, the antagonist of the film would be either the meteor that's going to kill Mitsuha and her village, or the space-time phenomenon that's keeping Mitsuha and Taiki apart. The reason why they're the antagonists is because those things are preventing our protagonists, Mitsuha and Taki, from being together and saving the village. There's also antagonists who aren't necessarily bad or evil, but are still in the way of the protagonist and their goals, usually because they are some sort of authority figure. In My Hero Academia, Midoriya's mother serves as an antagonist to his goals very briefly, not allowing him to dorm with the other students. She's not doing this to be evil or to get in his way, but because she has authority over him as his parent and is concerned about his safety. Nevertheless, she still serves as an antagonist for him and his dream of being a hero, albeit very briefly. However, my favorite kind of antagonists are internal antagonists. These are when a trait within a protagonist is preventing them from achieving their goals. An obvious example is Komi in Komi-san Can't Communicate's nervousness preventing her from making friends. Gurren Lagann's Simone, lack of confidence preventing him from being a leader. Avatar: The Last Airbender's Aang's pacifism conflicting with the thought of killing Lord Ozai. These are just some examples of antagonists that aren't characters. I only wanted to point these out because 1. These are my favorite types of antagonists and I want to see them more often, but 2. To show that they don't always have to be another character. Okay, so how do we make an antagonist for our story? If you didn't realize it already, antagonists somewhat are derived from the protagonist of the story. This makes sense because if the protagonist's goals is to defeat the Demon Lord, but the antagonist we created wants to capture a serial killer, the conflict wouldn't make much sense because their goals don't conflict. We should instead design an antagonist whose goal is to prevent the hero from defeating the Demon Lord, maybe even the Demon Lord himself. Or a politician who is preventing the hero from venturing to the Demon Nation due to some sort of political agreement. If the antagonist isn't causing conflict for the hero, it's not a very good antagonist. That's why good antagonists derive from protagonists. You have to figure out what your protagonists want, and then you have to make the antagonist to combat those wants. Batman represents order and overcoming adversity. His antagonist, the Joker, wants to create chaos and break people's characters down, specifically Batman's. Superman represents humility and the good in people. His antagonist, Lex Luthor, represents the selfishness and the ego of humanity. The Z Fighters want to protect Earth and humanity. Cell wants to absorb everyone. Naruto wants peace and unity between the villages. His antagonist, Pain, wants the same, but wants to achieve this by causing so much pain that it would force everybody to empathize with each other, uniting them in grief. What separates a good antagonist from a great antagonist, I believe, is not just the antagonist being an obstacle for the protagonist, but also them challenging a core trait or belief of our protagonist. But you obviously can't do this for every antagonist, so don't feel bad about making a simple antagonist who just poses as an obstacle for our protagonist. There's nothing wrong with a small, villain of the week antagonist, especially in long-term storytelling with an overarching or major villain. The goons are just as valuable to a story as the mob boss. If there's anything I want you to take away from this video, it's that antagonists are derived from your story's protagonist. So figure out who your protagonist is and their desires, and then create an antagonist in opposition to that. Okay, go right now.